I am here, and you know what? This really is one Thanksgiving treat that L.A. music fans seem to be more than thankful for. And after all, as just said, it has been 13 long, long years since Paul McCartney put an act together and took it on the road, and more than 25 years since anyone's seen an act called the Beatles, which Paul was such an important and major part of. So it's really no wonder that the 5-show sellout engagement that opens here tonight at the Forum has generated so much widespread enthusiasm. The question everyone wonders about, though, is what's generating Paul McCartney's enthusiasm to do a worldwide concert tour when he could just as easily be semi-retired at 47. The kind of undertaking you don't probably really have to do. Well, what motivates you now? What drives you to do this?
Well, basically, I got a band. You know, as opposed to having just done a lot of solo stuff and a lot of recording. We ended up, after this recent album we just made called Flowers in the Dirt, Plug.
Why not?
Why not? We ended up with the band, you know, and so the next logical move is, well, do you fancy going on tour? I think we're having so much fun playing that we thought, well, you know, we've got to do it, got to go out.
It's something like a songwriter's got to write and a singing songwriter's got to sing the songs he's written and sell the albums he's recorded, because that's what he likes to do.
I just try and make good music, you know, of any style. There are a couple of different styles on the album. There's a little thing called Put It There, which is a very sort of gentle little acoustic thing.
Give me your hand, I like to shake it. I want to show you I'm your friend.
Oh, yeah, the father and the son, yeah.
Father and the son thing, that was just a thing my dad used to say to me, you know, when we were kids, put it there, if it weighs a ton.
Put it there, if it weighs a ton. That's what a father said to his young son. I don't care.
So you've got that kind of thing, and then again, against it, you've got kind of like something like Figure of Eight or My Brave Face, which are like more up-tempo. So there's not like one style.
There is one style the fans are anxious to see and hear McCartney do again, the Beatles style. And he's obliging for the first time with 15 of the show's 29 numbers being Beatles songs.
I've seen that road before.
So it sounds like it's going to be an interesting mixture of the old and the new, but how interesting is what we'll be back at 11 o'clock tonight to tell you more about. But judging from the advanced anticipated reaction of all these folks here, what do you think of So, back to you guys.
All right, David, thank you. That's our news at 5, and thank you for joining us on this Thanksgiving Day.
As many of you well remember, it's been 25 years since Paul McCartney made his U.S. debut with the Beatles, 13 years since he last performed in the Southland. Tonight, McCartney kicked off a series of concerts at the Forum. Our David Jackson standing by live with a report on opening night. How was it? Exciting?
It was very exciting, Jerry. Got underway about 45 minutes ago here at the Forum, and of course the show was sold out, as all of them are here in Los Angeles. The crowd, I talked to some of the people before going in, seemed to be almost a little bit in awe of going in and seeing the former Beatle. He did not treat them to Beatles songs right off the top, though. He started with some material from a brand new album that Paul McCartney has out. The first song tonight was something called Figure of Eight. Now, obviously, the people that came in tonight were not here to hear necessarily Paul McCartney's brand new material. In fact, most were not here to hear material from the Wings period, say in the mid-1970s. These were a lot of Beatle fans, people that grew up with that music as young children back in the 1960s. We talked to many of them, including some who are here, believe it or not, from Liverpool, England. Have you ever seen Paul McCartney perform at all?
Only in the cabin many years ago.
And that would have been when?
1961, 60, in the at least beginning of the 60s.
I have watched him ever since I was a little baby, and I love him. I think he's great.
You go back like 27 years with Paul McCartney or whatever.
Yes, definitely. I love him.
I started liking him about 10 years ago, and I was too young to go see him in concert, so this is great. I drove from San Diego just to see it.
Have you been a long-time Beatles fan yourself?
Oh, yeah, since they were on Ed Sullivan. Well, before that, but that was the big day.
Who's going to play tonight?
The Beatles.
Paul McCartney, as you may know, has had some lean years, really, since 1970 when the Beatles broke up. He had some success with Wings, but has not performed in Los Angeles and in much of the United States since 1976. These shows, as I mentioned, sold out here at the Forum. He has 5 shows here, another one tomorrow night, 3 more Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday night. This is a very limited tour, incidentally, of North America. He goes on from here to Chicago, Toronto, Montreal, and then New York City, and then he's off the North American continent. May come back after a few more years, we've been told by some of the people that have worked with Paul McCartney, but no definite plans. So if you want to see him, you don't get very many opportunities, and over the next 5 and 6 nights here in Los Angeles will be one of the few chances people will get. Reporting live from Inglewood, I'm David Jackson. Now back in the studio, Jerry and Pat.
All right, thanks for that. Paul trying to sell some new music first.
Hey, not bad Thanksgiving duty, though, David. We'll talk about that. Adams was there.
It's been 13 years since the former Beatle hit the road, and fans say his concert tour is long overdue. Thousands of people of all ages packed the Forum tonight to hear both the old and the new McCartney.
I'm very happy about it. I think it's long overdue, and I think the Beatles legend should live on, and Paul's carrying on. Couldn't be happier.
From Beatles to Wings to present, he's great all the time.
I've been waiting for 13 years. I missed the last tour, and that's just, now I'm complete.
I love good music, new music, and Paul, too.
The show began with a 14-minute documentary of McCartney's career and the political changes the world witnessed during those years. Then the former Fab Four members stepped on stage, and the crowd went crazy. His first number was Figure of 8 off his new album, Flowers in the Dirt.
Round and round every ring I go.
The release has sold 500,000 copies so far, but compared to his other hits, it's not living up to expectations. But music analysts are waiting to see if his world tour will jumpstart sales.
This is the first of 5 sold-out performances here at the Forum. Even if the world tour doesn't boost sales of McCartney's new album, it is expected to give his career a much-needed shot in the arm. From the LA Forum, Dana Adams, Channel 5, News at 10.
Score a rare ticket to see the former Beatle in action. She joins us now live from Inglewood. Jane, you must be having fun out there.
Well, Carl and Pat, yeah, but mostly out here. We were out here just a few minutes ago, and we heard the entire audience inside sing Hey Jude a cappella. It was incredible. Now, you've all heard the one about how you know you're old when your kids tell you that they heard Paul McCartney was in a band before Wings. Well, McCartney is hoping to draw on both Wings and Beatles fans as he tries to make a comeback, kicking off his first tour here tonight in a very long time. After 13 years away from the U.S., Paul is back. Fans ate their turkey early to get to the Forum for something they could really give thanks for. McCartney's appeal spans several generations. Each fan has a favorite song. What's your favorite Paul McCartney song?
Well, I like Yesterday, but I think I identify most with Full on the Hill.
And you?
Definitely Yesterday.
Yesterday. And you?
Hey Jude.
One that he probably wouldn't sing would be Oh Darling, and I would love him to sing that. I know he won't, though, but I'd love him to sing that.
What about you?
Band on the Run.
Okay, there we go. What about you?
Cook of the House, Linda McCartney. Yeah.
Linda.
The concert began with a McCartney retrospective, music that holds so many personal memories for all of us. It covered the Beatles, Wings, and now the new McCartney, less pop, more social conscience. He began with the song Figure of 8 off his new album.
Well, you got me dancing in a figure of 8. Don't know I'm coming or going out early, your leg.
there was, as always, his wife, Linda.
Okay, that's the only song they let us videotape. He did sing plenty of Beatles songs. Gotta Get You Into My Life, Can't Buy Me Love, Yesterday, on and on and on. He will be singing again tomorrow night as well as Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. All right, now for the corny stuff. McCartney's career in the 80s has been a long and winding road. He hopes that changes. Pat and Carl, the guy's pushing 50. I can't believe it. It seems like it was only yesterday he toured the U.S. for the first time.
He does look good, though.
Is it better to love one another than to go for a walk in the dark?
Tonight, Paul McCartney covered all the bases. He took his fans back to the 60s when he sang Beatles songs. He moved into the 70s with Wings, and he performed songs from his current album, Flowers in the Dirt. Fans loved it.
Started listening to him and then always said, first time he plays in America, I'm going no matter where. You know, skip Dallas, miss class in University of Texas. Thanksgiving with the family, I don't care. It's the greatest day of my life, get to see Paul.
He and John together wrote the greatest songs in the last 20 years. No one has written the music that Paul's written. And we look forward to hearing his old songs and music from Flowers in the Dirt, too.
What's this for?
Well, I hope to give Paul my rose when I see him up there in some Beatlefest shirts from Beatlefest this weekend.
This is a Paul McCartney doll that I just got for my birthday because my friends know how much I love Paul McCartney.
It seems as though tonight's show was as emotional for Paul as it was for his fans. And it was the perfect way to end a Thanksgiving Day. Francesca Capucci, Channel 7 Eyewitness News at the Great Western Forum in Inglewood.
And on 3 giant screens, then the spotlights came on.
Well, you got me dancing in a figure roulette. Don't know I'm coming or going, I'm early on late. Round and round the ring.
15 of 29 songs were old Beatles hits. That's the band he was in before Wings. He'll play 4 more shows here before moving on to Chicago.
You needed to explain that.
It's an old joke.
We'll be back in a listen next.
States in 13 years. And, of course, David Sheehan, Mr. First Nighter, was there among them. How was it?
Oh, it was a performance to be thankful for, I'd
Really?
say. You know, when he was about in his 20s and the Beatles were in their heyday, Paul McCartney was often referred to as the cute one. But boy, tonight at the Forum, McCartney put cuteness aside in favor of the musical mastery that's always been his gift in a 2.5-hour concert performance that was indeed a pleasure to behold.
Well, you got me dancing in a figure roulette. Don't know I'm coming or going, I'm early on late. Round and round the ring.
Figure of Eight was one of many songs McCartney performed from his new Flowers in the Dirt album, which is what originally motivated him to do this worldwide tour. The dozen concerts he's already played in Europe has pushed overseas album sales past the 1 million mark. And there was definitely a very warm reception for the new McCartney music here at the Forum. But besides getting his new songs across to a new audience, McCartney is also going out of his way for the first time to satisfy the obvious audience desire to hear some of the old songs that made him famous as a Beatle.
You left me standing here a long, long time ago.
I wish I had time to show you a whole lot more because he did some songs like Can't Buy Me Love, Good Day, Sunshine, Gotta Get You in My Life with so much enthusiasm and energy you'd think they were just written yesterday. A really good show. If you can get a ticket to that one, you're a lucky person.
That is a hot ticket, too, isn't it? All right. Thank you, David.
Redan imorgon kväll är syskonen Bolme tillbaka. Då sänder vi nämligen en...
It's a cold October morning in Toronto, and hundreds of loyal McCartney fans are braving the elements. They're in line to buy tickets to see a 47-year-old rock and roller.
He's one of the best musicians in the world, I think.
Well, I just like his baby face, I guess.
I'd like to do a little song now which...
Half a world away at Omnisport Stadium in Paris, this former Beatle takes to the stage and electrifies the crowd of 17,000.
I was alone, I took a ride, I didn't know what I would find there. Another road where maybe I could see another kind of mind there. Ooh, then I suddenly see you. Ooh, did I tell you I need you?
His Flowers in the Dirt tour has been declared one of the best concert shows in years, mixing old Beatles songs with material from McCartney's critically acclaimed new album. In fact, it was the success of the album that prompted McCartney to tour for the first time in 13 years. That and his realization that there's nothing like performing live.
I went to see Dustin Hoffman in Merchant of Venice. He said sidetracking a bit, but when I was watching him, it was in London. Yes. There's a great production of it, and I was watching it, and Dustin walked on. I got this amazing feeling of, wow, you know, I'm in the same room as him. And that's live, that's theatre. And there's only live can give you that. Yeah. Film doesn't give you that. TV doesn't give you that. When you're actually in the room with someone, you know. So it's the same for us with an audience. You're actually there, they're there, they're waving up, holding up their lighters, and they're fainting or whatever they're doing, you know.
1989 seems to be the year for the over 40 rock set to tour again. Physical strain is tough when you're half that age. McCartney knows you've got to tour differently when you're almost 50 years old.
Don't tour quite as crazily as if we were kind of 20-year-olds in a heavy metal band, you know, just go for it. I mean, we're a little older and wiser now, so it's not as much of a strain.
Have you worked out a way to make it a little easier on yourself?
No.
Oh.
I wish I had. What you do is, you know, about a year out from something like this, you've got to start thinking, okay, we're not a little rehearsal band anymore. We've got to get our stamina up. I've got to be able to sing 2 hours a night, you know. And the joke is, with the Beatles, I probably sang 30 minutes, because there was John, George, and Ringo did a number as well. There's no way I could have done this a year ago, you know. I just wouldn't have been in shape.
This ambitious tour, with its movable stage pieces and computerized laser light show, will cross 4 continents before it's over. And so, as the loyal Canadian fans line up for their shot at prime seats for the concert of the year, Paul McCartney and the 14 trucks that carry his roadshow make their way around the world, leaving him breathless and begging for more.
Tomorrow in part 2, we're going to take a look at the remarkable album that got McCartney back on tour. That album, of course, is Flowers in the Dirt. Need to do, Thalia. Back to Paul. Paul McCartney's current concert tour is a huge hit all over the world. But it was the success of the album, Flowers in the Dirt, that prompted McCartney to tour for the first time in 13 years. In part 2 of our series on Paul McCartney, we focus on the extraordinary album and on Paul's collaboration with Elvis Costello.
There never could be a better moment than this one.
This moment in the career of Paul McCartney is a sweet one. Critics around the world are searching for superlatives to describe his new album, Flowers in the Dirt. The general consensus is it's the best thing McCartney's done since the breakup of the Fab Four 19 years ago. The album has already produced 2 hits. This one, a happy, sentimental love song, and My Brave Face. The album's first single, and already on many lists for Pop Song of the Year. McCartney has recorded 16 albums since the end of the Beatles. In many music critics' ears, especially the British ones, Paul's solo projects were candy-coated. and McCartney was declared a wimp. Quite a come down for someone who was once considered to be one of the greatest songwriters of the age. But with this new album, that's all changed. McCartney knew he had a tough act to follow, his own. He had to prove himself all over again.
You think when you've done, well, I mean, you know, like something like Yesterday as in America, North America, I think it's been played 5 million times, which no other song has done. You kid yourself, you think at the back of your mind, you think, well, I can just hover now, you know, and they'll all know. But there's always young kids coming up, and they say, who's he anyway, you know? Big deal. So, 5 million, what's that? I'd rather have AC/DC or something, you know. And you've always got to kind of be current in some form or another.
While this album has its share of pop hits, it is a more complex LP, deeper than his previous work. Part of the reason for that is McCartney's collaboration with pop's dark soul, Elvis Costello.
I think, you know, when it was suggested that I might work with Elvis, he wasn't collaborating with anyone, nor was I. He had an album coming up, so did I. So our managers knew each other and suggested we got together. So I said, well, look, we won't tell anyone about this, but we'll just sit down, see if we like each other. Because, I mean, I'd met him in the corridors of the recording studio and stuff quite a while, so I knew he was an okay fella. But I didn't know how it'd be, the chemistry of writing together. That can go wrong. So we sat down, and first day we sort of had something. We finished off one of his songs that was his big hit, Veronica.
Is it all in that pretty little head of yours? What goes on in that place in the dark? When I used to know a girl, I could have sworn that her name was Veronica.
Finished that, and then he finished a B-side of mine that I was having a bit of trouble with the words. So we started to think, oh, you know, this isn't bad. So then we started from scratch. And we said, look, let's forget anything we've ever done before, let's start. And we ended up writing 9 new songs together, 4 of which got on the album. But I like him, you know, he's got a strong opinion.
But that was how you and John worked. It was carping and sniping back and forth, but it was done with a lot of respect, admiration.
You can't just sort of say, oh, that's lovely what you're doing, I love you. You know, it's got to be, oh, come off it, mate. That stinks. You've got to have people with firm opinions. They can't just yes you all the time.
To date, Flowers in the Dirt has sold more than 2 million albums worldwide, making it the most successful post-Beatles project ever. The album is good enough to thrill die-hard Beatle fans who would buy it anyway, but the real test, can he gather new fans? And can he bring back the old ones who said he was a milquetoast? Looks like he's showing them all. Tomorrow, in part 3, we get a rare glimpse into the private Paul McCartney as the former Beatle talks about growing up and about being a dad and about his dad. Yeah, this is one of my favorites. Paul McCartney is one of the world's best-known performers. In his infrequent dealings with the news media, he's usually quite cooperative until it comes to questions about his family. But during our recent conversations backstage at the Paris Omnisport Stadium, he revealed bits of a rarely seen private side, especially when he talked about his father, Jim.
I never had any of that. You know, he was a great, ordinary, very earthy Liverpool man, left school when he was 14, but he always aspired like mad. He taught us to learn to do crosswords, kids, he'd say. And in fact, because of him, my cousin, who's older than me now, compiles 3 of Britain's hardest crosswords. And I said, well, how come? He said, it was your old man. So my dad, you know, definitely was a bit of a goer, you know.
In fact, on his new album, Flowers in the Dirt, McCartney included an exquisite little song called Put It There, inspired by his dad, Jim.
Put it there, if it weighs a ton. That's what a father said to his young son.
He had all these funny expressions from Liverpool, you know, Liverpool people have got all that. And he used to say, put it there. And we had to say, if it weighs a ton. It's just a little thing you had to do, you know, it's a joke. And he had millions of others. But this one, Put It There, I found myself telling my own son, who's 12. And I said, put it there, if it weighs a ton, you know.
Speaking about your father, there was a story or two I remember about stovepipe pants, real skinny ones. We used to call them, you call them drainies, I think. He didn't like those. Didn't let you wear them?
What I used to do was, Well, there's two things. What I used to do, he wouldn't let me wear them, but you had to wear them because all your mates had them. So I used to change on the bus. So I took the trousers in. They were grey flannel, regulation school trousers, you know, about 20-inch bottoms or something. It was very ungroovy, and I was well, you know, displeased with this whole thing. So I went in, and my mate at school, a fellow called Ian James, he said, I know a tailor. So we went out in the lunchtime, and I gave him to the tailor, and I said, how long, you know, are you going to take? He said, about 4 hours. I said, great, we'll be back at 4 o'clock, was when school finished. Went home with them on, and my dad said, those same trousers I bought you. I said, yeah.
While Paul seems to be a fairly accessible star, usually honest and open with the media, he rarely discusses his own children or his home life. His children often tour with him, and his wife Linda does backup singing and keyboards in the show. It's a very different life on the road from the wild and woolly early days of the Beatles, where equal time was allotted for wine and women as well as song.
Speaking of the early Beatle days, Paul, pretty wild times in Hamburg, the instant celebrity, all the money. Your family is so important to you, your privacy in raising your kids, but those early Beatle days, has that influenced you? Are you more strict or more liberal as a parent? And does that influence the way you raise your own kids?
I tend to bring them up kind of how my dad and mum brought me and my brother up. Obviously, there's new things arrived on the scene, you know, so whereas he never told me anything about sex, he just sort of said, see those dogs over there? Well, that's it. Oh, God, no, really, you know. Well, now you've got to get into much more detail, you know, because you know, you've just got to be more specific now because there's a lot more danger out there, I think, than there was. My upbringing is all that's influenced me. You know, I've kind of met millions of people all over the world, but as far as common sense is concerned, I've never met anyone half as good as the people in Liverpool. You know, my old Auntie Gin, she's the type you said, sit down, son, I can see there's something wrong now, we'll have a cup of tea, and you tell me all about it, you know. I mean, you know, you don't get better than that. Like, you go, all right, my girlfriend's left me, you know, and you blurt it all out. And you know, you've got to have people like that.
The average person speaks to the man in the street. Can you imagine the first one you meet?
Tomorrow in part 4, we're going to take a look at how McCartney's Flowers in the Dirt tour is bringing old Beatles music back to live concerts. Hey.
McAdory with the last chapter in his Paul McCartney series.
Thanks. Today, the final part of our series in our Paul McCartney interviews. Legal struggles among the remaining Beatles have prevented any collaboration or new Beatles music from happening. And as you'll see, McCartney offers some hopeful news about long-running difficulties finally getting resolved.
The best things in life are free, but you can keep them for the birds and bees. Now give me more.
By the end of the 60s, the Beatles were enjoying unbelievable success. In 1969 alone, they were on top of the world. They earned an astounding £60 million. But this musical success story was a disastrous business story. The Beatles themselves received very little of that money. In fact, the Fab Four were nearly broke. Paul McCartney is still astounded by the bad business deals the group made.
You take care of the creative end and you trust someone to take care of the other end. And if they blow it, they blow it for you too, you know. It's the same with our songs, you know, early on. Lennon McCartney signed a deal that I'm still under. You know, nobody ever suggested varying it. I mean, if I'd have known what I know now, I would have been in the first year we ever had a #1. I said, right, change the deal, you know, these boys are doing good. And certainly, 10 years later, I would have been in for a major shake-up. But you didn't know stuff like that, you know. Literally, John and I thought that songs were just in the air and that everybody owned them. I mean, we were that naive.
The record companies and publishers were doing it to the Beatles, and the Beatles began doing it to each other, hiring lawyers and developing tangled webs of legal battles. After the recent settlement with their record label, Capital EMI, the Beatles themselves are sorting their own problems out.
It's taken about 20 years to do all the wheeling and dealing, because, you know, once one party gets a lawyer, the other one does, and it goes crazy. So we've had one of those kind of forever lawyer affairs. But we've done all the dealing. George has signed off. I've signed off. It goes to Yoko this weekend. Like a huge crate full of documents, like the Geneva for the agreement. It's terrible. And I think after that, in about a week or so, I think Ringo intends to sign off, which would be great, because finally it's all sorted. We can be friends. We don't have to argue about this or that. It looks like it's finally happening, you know, which is great. Boy, it's such a relief.
Ending the 20-year war will not only be a relief, it'll also clear the way for new Beatles projects.
We've had this film called Long and Winding Road. We've been trying to make it for a long time, which we want it to be like the definitive thing of the Beatles, you know, so where we can talk about footage and say, this is how it was. Maybe we can do a bit of narration. Maybe even do some new music.
While recent solo projects from both Ringo Starr and George Harrison have been successful, there's no doubt a reunion of the remaining Beatles would cause a sensation. McCartney says he's particularly anxious to write with George Harrison once the way is clear.
I've never written with George, and it came up in one of the meetings. We said, well, you know, if we get this thing signed off, maybe me and George could write together. Till then, it's too fraught with problems. You know, we'd write together, write something fab, and then the lawyer would say, Clause 94, the aforementioned agreement. You know, you go, oh, bloody hell.
Speculation on a Beatles reunion has been around for years. Of course, since the murder of John Lennon in 1980, we'll never have the Fab Four back, but at least soon, the remaining three will be free to conjure up some of that old Beatles magic one more time.
So often in television, the person whose face is in front of the camera receives sometimes undue credit when actually the bulk of the work is done by talented and dedicated people behind the scenes. And in this McCartney series, that is certainly the case with producer Leslie Elston, who came over to Paris with me, hired the camera crews, did all of the arrangements, supervised the editing back here in Toronto and the writing. And a special thank you, too, to Doug McClellan, the tape editor, who, a labor of love. He did put a lot of work into that, and I thank the two of them.
And it's Hey, Bob McAdory.
What's his name next to me here? Okay, well, I saw Paul McCartney's Flowers in the Dirt concert twice in Paris. It was great. My favorite things about it, one, I think they unplugged Linda's mic and gave her a toy piano. Great. The other, he did lots of good old Beatles songs. Magic. In part 4 of our series, we find out why, after all these years, McCartney has put the Beatles stuff back on his song list. Most of us, the closest we've ever come to hearing Beatles music live in concert is by watching old film footage. Legal battles fueled by heated emotions and unresolved personal arguments have kept this music off the concert stages since the Beatles stopped touring in 1966. And now, more than 20 years later, Paul McCartney's current Flowers in the Dirt tour brings it back. The fans at this concert in Paris loved McCartney's new material, but enthusiasm turned to electricity when Paul took this crowd back to hear some of the greatest pop music ever, launching into songs like Can't Buy Me Love, Sgt. Pepper, and Hey Jude. McCartney has said he added the old material now because he's finally been able to come to terms with the breakup of the Beatles. Like a divorce, it left emotional scars that took a long time to heal. Still, he had some concerns about mixing old Beatles classics with new, untried songs.
It's like after a Beatles thing, it's like follow that. You know, you've got Can't Buy Me Love and the highest kites. And then I do something like an acoustic number off the new album, put it there. And I must admit, in the first few shows, I thought, is this going to go at all?
Paul may have been concerned about the new material going over well, but the question may better apply to the old Beatles songs in the show. It's impossible to hear McCartney and his new band sing the old songs and not remember how we first heard them.
Hey, Jude, don't make it bad. Take a sad song and make it better.
You're doing Beatles songs time in your show, and I loved hearing them, but it was, I don't know how to describe it, there was almost a sad feeling inside, nostalgia. Do you have any of that feeling when you sing them?
When you start the song, Can't Buy Me Love is the one that puts it to me. It's so sort of Beatle-y, and that was it. And you started up, and I counted 1, 2, 1, 2, can't. And the minute that kind of thing comes on, you're suddenly in this sort of little role. And they're not replicas, it's not sound-alikes. You know, it is me doing my song, so there's something kind of genuine about it. And yet you get this sort of kick in your stomach when you hear it. And I don't know how to describe it. I don't either. I know what you mean. It's kind of like a nostalgia or something.
To hear 17,000 people singing the chorus to Hey Jude was
fairly groovy. Yeah, I know. There is something very strong in it. And you know what's interesting, too, about these shows we're doing is with the Beatles, the people used to say, well, what's the age of your audience? We used to say, from 9 till 90, because it used to be the age. And that's what you're getting now. It's funny, it's like it's coming back. The older people have got this nostalgia thing. The young kids haven't. It's just the music for them. There's none of this sadness you're talking about. It's just joy for them.
Tomorrow, the final part of our series, we'll look at what tore the Beatles apart, and we'll get some good news about a possible reconciliation. Coming up next, another little commercial treat, some of the big ones.
Former Beatle Paul McCartney's world tour rolled into the Skydome tonight with the better part of the Sky tent and McCartney's own equipment in place. The sound quality was greatly improved. 56,000 fans, most in the 30-something age group, turned out to see a man whose music spans 2 generations. CFTO's Sean Murray reports.
The evening kicked off with videos of the Beatles in their heyday and continued with a look of some of the hits of McCartney's solo career. A lot has changed since those early days, but McCartney appears to have changed very little. Even at age 47, the boyish charm is still there, and even after weeks of touring, so is the energy. McCartney is now nearing the end of his world tour, launched to promote his latest album, Flowers in the Dirt. But he's also been promoting the environmental group Friends of the Earth.
Either we just go around the world having a bit of fun, making some money and making music for the fans, or at the end of it all, we come off it all and we think, okay, there was a little bit more to it than that. So that's when we decided to hook up with the Friends of the Earth. And all I'm really doing is I don't know that much about it. You know, I'm a father of 4. If I go to a lake, I'd like it to be clean, please, so I can swim in it. I hate the idea that it's like, there's all crap in it, you know.
While none of the proceeds of the tour go to Friends of the Earth, the group is selling T-shirts and has been authorized to set up booths to sign up new members at various venues on the concert tour. Sean Murray, CFTO News.
This is Mike Caprice with the Stars tonight. 56,000 fans packed the Skydome last night as Paul McCartney put on a show for the young and old alike. As well as playing songs from his new album, Flowers in the Dirt, McCartney turned back the clock with some old Beatles classics. It's his first tour in 13 years.
When we return, we're going to take a look at the Geminis and the Entertainment Week in review. When we return, we're going to take a look at the Geminis.
Thank you.
It's time for a look at the week's events and entertainment. Tina Sabatniak and Brent Bambry are here, but first a look at the entertainment news. Paul McCartney was in Toronto yesterday for a concert and press conference. He came to my house for lunch, and then he responded to recent rumors of a Beatles reunion.
There is a film that we might get round to in a couple of years that we've been meaning to do. And there might possibly be some involvement there where we play together, me, George, and Ringo. Now, we wouldn't call it a Beatles reunion, but you probably would.
We are told that if you don't already have tickets to see McCartney this week, it could be tough to find them. The show sold out in a matter of hours.
The Paul McCartney World Tour is his first in 13 years, featuring music from his latest album, Flowers in the Dirt. Now, all 4 New York shows are sold out, so here's a look for those of us without a ticket.
selling out the Garden.
Takes one middle-aged.
Back in on his first tour in 13 years. McCartney opened tonight at Madison Square Garden, joining the list of other middle-aged rockers, the Rolling Stones and the Who have played there this year. And as with those other shows, this was not the performance of a middle-aged man. Tonight was the first of 4 shows for McCartney at the Garden.
Well, the Fab One is back. Al
Yes,
Roker.
indeed.
Still going strong. The 2-hour show features a little bit of everything from McCartney's long career, and in case you couldn't get tickets this time, McCartney will be back in February with another tour of the United States. Not bad for a middle-aged rocker.
Not bad at all. When we continue with Eyewitness
News this morning, nasty,
Really?
nasty review. It's particularly futile to complain about McCartney, who's been an annoying lightweight for so long that hardly anyone is indifferent about him anymore. Pop music's Mr. Marshmallow may understand what it takes to make a radio classic, but under the hot lights of a stage, he melts quickly. Then he gets into talking about his wife, Linda. And he says, Linda proves once again that she is one of the best tambourine players around. Because
Well, do your imitation of Linda last night.
this is the one place where Rob and I agree. Linda was shaky in this kind. She stands at the keyboard the whole night doing this. 2.5 hours
Didn't you
of
look
Linda
just like her, ladies
doing
and
this.
Yeah.
Anyway, I want to just say to Rob Tannenbaum, you know, lighten up a little bit here. The guy's been around. The music was fun. Great songs from the Beatles. Rosemary, you just walk through anytime you want, okay? Great songs from the Beatle days and some new songs. And if you get a chance to see this concert, and I know, Sarah Lee, you said you've spent $7.3 million on 2 tickets. You should go see this one because Paul McCartney is great. He really is. So I had a good time there.
Okay.
Now, we should mention today's soap opera.
Paul McCartney got an uproarious ovation from a packed house when he walked on stage, the former Beatles' first New York appearance in 13 years. This morning at the Garden, McCartney talked to the press. He said he enjoys the tour, and as for the group, he says they're older and wiser.
We don't party all night, just so as we can come here and talk to you and look halfway alive in the morning. So a couple of the guys have got young kids and families and stuff, so it's a little bit more of a regular crowd than with Wings, which is a bit more of a party group. It's great if you could take the pace.
Well, yeah.
Lots of changes. My ears are still ringing, Ernie. Madison Square Garden was the backdrop for the return of a musical legend. Ernie is clapping away. Paul McCartney.
The British re-invasion hit hard last night as McCartney rocked and rolled the night away. His first American tour in 14 years, and the fans ate up every memorable moment. Now, McCartney will perform at the Garden 3 more nights, tonight, Thursday, and Friday. But as you might expect, all the shows are sold out. Meanwhile, yesterday on the other coast, famous friends have
begun a concert tour at Madison Square Garden. Carol Iavana jumped at the chance to talk with him.
For the first time in 13 years, Paul McCartney was thrilling audiences on a New York stage. And last night, the 14,000 fans at Madison Square Garden who savored their own 60s memories were enjoying the past and the present at the same time. When Paul and the rest of the Beatles arrived in New York for the first time in the early 60s, teens screamed and fainted, and the young Fab Four were just beginning to make their mark on history. But now, more than 20 years later, it is an older, more subdued Paul McCartney who commands the stage, with so many more years of songwriting and music making behind him.
We're all older and wiser now.
While New Yorkers have many memories of Paul McCartney, it is also true that Paul McCartney has memories of and an affection for New York City.
I met Ed Sullivan on the street once. He didn't recognize me. I said, "Hey, Ed, woo, I was on your show, man. We got big figures." "Oh, yeah, sure."
In the concert, McCartney is doing a lot of the Beatles songs he hasn't sung for years, and he's enjoying the emotions they evoke.
They take people back, which is, like, obvious, but they take them back to a good place, which isn't so obvious, you know. So it's great. It's really good to be the person singing that thing when you can see them going through all this stuff, you know.
McCartney says the songs evoke emotions for him as well, but he and the Beatles were younger, so much younger, as the song says, than today. In Manhattan, I'm Carol Iavana, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
TV to Pittsburgh. This is Eyewitness News Weekend Edition.
26 years ago, Paul McCartney, along with John Lennon, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr, performed on stage at Pittsburgh Civic Arena, attracting thousands of screaming teenagers as the Beatles. Tonight, the former Beatle takes center stage as he brings his $26 million tour to Pittsburgh. The band members may be new, but obviously the cute Beatle still has the talent to draw thousands. His show is sold out. Dave Clark is at the Civic Arena to give us a look at the excitement surrounding tonight's Paul McCartney concert. Dave.
Well, Vicki, I'm surrounded by thousands of people to my right, to my left. I think about 14,000 people are expected here tonight. We just heard from promoter Ed Travisari. There are still about 400 tickets left for tonight's show, so there's still a chance you can get in here. Now, the show starts in about 90 minutes from now. The fans are definitely ready for the show. It's a big show. By the way, it costs $26 million to produce the show that will be performed here tonight. It's a big night for Beatle fans, young and old. They want to see Paul McCartney.
All my
Paul McCartney has been a beloved music legend for over 2 decades. Female fans especially loved him. Many of them said he was the cutest of the Beatles. McCartney may be a lot older now, but he still has a magical effect on his fans, especially those who waited outside the Civic Arena early today.
Well, I've been a Beatles fan all my life, ever since I was 11 years old, and this is like the culmination of everything that I am today.
Well, I love the guy. I grew up with him, you know, since I was this high. It's great.
Well, I almost went to New York to see him. It's fantastic, you know, especially 2 days. I'm going both nights.
I remember watching the Beatles back in '64 on the Sullivan shows at my grandmother's house, and ever since I've been a big fan.
Right now, backstage here at the Civic Arena, the stage crew is getting everything set, and then Paul McCartney fans will have their dreams come true.
I've always liked his music, and I think that seeing him alone is important. Maybe the only Beatle I ever get to see.
As you can see, you've got all kinds of fans here, an interesting mix of people, a lot of people in their 30s, 40s, even 50s. And earlier today, we collected some Paul McCartney facts, one of which is the fact that Paul takes about an hour every day to warm up, musically that is. Everybody on the tour is a vegetarian, and the scalpers are selling tickets from $600 to $1,800 for tonight's show. So we hope if you're coming down, you enjoy it. There's still tickets available. Back to you, Vicki.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Ron.
Well, back in the USSR today, there were some surprises. 200,000 Soviets marched through the streets of Moscow chanting, "Remember Romania."
Average low on the 4th day of February, 35 our average high. Records are 68 set in 1890, and then 95 years later, 7 below was our record low. Last year was very February and winter-like, 23 and 12. Today we ended up with nearly 0.8 of an inch of rain. Started out the morning at 2 a.m. with 46 degrees, our high for the day. Our current 28 is the coldest reading so far, with a very strong northwest wind right now at 14, gusting up to 23. The wind chill is making it feel like 8 degrees outside. Relative humidity, 78%. If you have a home barometer, Might be a good time to set it. It's on the rise, and 30 inches of mercury even. PSI is in the good range at 49 with fine particulate matter in the air, and the regional temperatures show the warm spots to be just a degree above freezing.
This is ABC.
The night thousands of Pittsburgh fans have been waiting for is over as Paul McCartney dazzles the crowd for night number 1. We'll have a live report. In Moscow, Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev gets a big boost as 200,000 take to the streets. And the pro football season comes to a close in Hawaii.
Good evening, I'm Tom Weedles.
And I'm Sheila Hyland. WTAE 4 News is next.
You're watching WTAE TV in Pittsburgh. Honored as the best newscast in Pennsylvania, this is WTAE 4 News.
Thanks for joining us. It's been 26 years since ex-Beatle Paul McCartney dazzled Pittsburgh fans.
And tonight, more than 14,000 packed the Civic Arena to hear the sounds of the past and present. The 47-year-old bass guitarist is making Pittsburgh his only stop in Pennsylvania on his current tour. Tonight was night number 1 of a 2-night performance in the city. Let's go now to the Civic Arena where Yvonne Zanos is standing by live with more on tonight's events. Yvonne.
Well, Tom, for the first time in 26 years, Paul McCartney played Pittsburgh, and for over 14,000 fans tonight, it was a night to remember. Now, the show began with a 14-minute film of the Beatles and of us of yesterday. They took us from 1969 to 1973, 1983, 89, and finally today, in that moment when Paul McCartney stepped out and took center stage. It was the new sound of Paul McCartney that started off the show tonight, but it was the old sounds that made thousands in the audience young again.
A breeze in the air, or you hear an old Beatles song, like you hear a song like And I Love Her. Where you at? You're back in 1964.
Back in 1964, when Paul McCartney and the Beatles played here in Pittsburgh, a younger Lynn Keener was waiting in line to see them. Today, she waited in line with her son.
I seen him when I was 11. He's going to see him when he's 11. It's a show. It's a show.
It's a show that has been called the Concert of the Year, playing to rave reviews in packed arenas around the world.
I wanted to see what I consider a living legend. I mean, Paul McCartney was very much a part of my early life and very much a part of me, really.
And these 19-year-olds say they are longtime fans as well.
I guess we can remember back. I started in 2nd grade with the cartoons, Beatles cartoons.
Although he is no longer surrounded by the Beatles of old, fans here say the sounds of Paul McCartney yesterday and today will long be remembered.
I think that his music will be enjoyed even in the next generation.
He's a classic.
About half the songs tonight were vintage Beatle and about half were Paul McCartney. And, you know, I think talking to fans here, it was clear that most of them came out because of the vintage Beatle, but it was Paul McCartney, the new Paul McCartney, that was being promoted tonight. The only song we were allowed to tape was Figure of 8, and also all the T-shirts were of Paul alone. But whatever the strategy, it seems to be working, because I talked to lots of people as they were leaving and folks here, and they were telling us that, you know, even if they did come in for the old vintage Beatles, it was the new Paul McCartney. They left with a new sense of respect for him. Is that right, guys? Yeah. So it was a night to remember here in Pittsburgh, and quite a few say they're coming back tomorrow night for a repeat performance. Reporting live from the Civic Arena, I'm Yvonne Zanos. Now back to you, Sheila.
Thanks, Yvonne. Looks like a lot of fun out there. to come on WTAE 4 News. Will the real Paul McCartney please stand?
And finally tonight, will the real Paul McCartney please stand up? When the name Paul McCartney pops up, many of you probably conjure up images of a man on stage singing and playing bass guitar for the Fab Four. Now meet Paul McCartney, the woman. That's right, Paul McCartney lives in Highland Park, and about the only thing she has in common with the ex-Beatle is her unusual name.
I would get phone calls from kids asking me when my next album was going to be released or whatever, kiddingly.
When is your next album going to be released?
It's not, because I don't sing very well at all.
Paul McCartney is actually Paula McCartney. Her husband gave her the nickname, and it apparently stuck. By the way, Paula McCartney owns no Beatles records, and I imagine we probably didn't see her anywhere
No, I don't think she went to the concert. That wraps up this weekend edition of WTAE 4 News. Thanks for being with us.
We'll see you next weekend. Until then, have a good week and good night.
WTAE 4 News is brought to you in part by Today's Home, serving Pittsburgh's interior design needs for over 40 years.
This closed-captioned newscast has been a presentation of WTAE 4 News. Live from Television Hill, this is Channel 11 News Night Beat with Bill Martin, Cynthia Fodor, Kevin Benson with the weather outside, and Derek Gunn with sports. Now, Channel 11 News Night Beat.
Well, the Civic Arena rocks tonight to the sounds of Paul McCartney. By the way, it was 26 years ago the ex-Beatle last played Pittsburgh. Hello, everyone. I'm Bill Martin.
And I'm Cynthia Fodor. Our top story tonight, a sold-out crowd jams the arena to hear rock and roll legend Paul McCartney.
Fans weren't disappointed. They heard a nice mix of nostalgic Beatles tunes as well as McCartney's newer material.
Our Keith James is at the arena with more on this night of music. Keith?
Bill, Cynthia, it was indeed a mix of McCartney music, but it was the McCartney memories, and most specifically the Beatle memories, that made this crowd get a big, big thrill. I have a couple of the fans with me here. As you can see, your name is?
Renee Soroka.
Where are you from, Renee?
Brighton Heights.
Okay, and your thoughts on the concert?
It was fantastic. The Laser Light Show was unbelievable.
Your favorite song?
My favorite song, probably Live and Let Die.
And how long have you been a McCartney fan?
Oh, long time.
Longer than we care to go into. Thank you, Renee. Mr. McCartney, of course, was on hand with his lovely wife, Linda, who he introduced as Gertrude Higginbottom, I believe. Don't ask me why. Part of the show. One guy who might know why is Glenn Peters. Glenn, you have followed McCartney literally from coast to coast. Why?
Well, it's pure McCartney magic. He's simply the best.
And any idea why he calls Linda Gertrude Higginbottom?
Well, basically it's because of her love for animals.
Okay. Your thoughts on the show, because you've seen a lot. You've been in Chicago and you're going to Cincinnati. Your thoughts on this show tonight?
Simply great. It's another example of pure McCartney magic.
All right, McCartney magic, and it was a magical night for Pittsburgh as well. And there's nothing else I can say except I saw him in '76, and this even topped that extravaganza. Bill, Cynthia, back to you.
People having a lot of fun. All right, thank you, Keith.
Thanks. Paul McCartney last passed through Pittsburgh 26 years ago with the Beatles. The Fab Four sold out the Civic Arena, and back then, it cost a lot less to see your favorite rock star. Tickets for the 1964 Beatles concert cost $5.90. 13,000 fans turned out for the 35-minute show. It costs a little more for a ticket now. For this tour, they were going for about $28.50, but that didn't stop the fans. 28,000 seats sold out for the two-day event. McCartney says he picked Pittsburgh over several other cities like Cleveland and Philly. He says because our town reminds him of his own hometown, Liverpool, England.
That's a nice note, isn't it? Well, one of the guitars used tonight by Paul McCartney has a Pittsburgh connection. It was owned by Carl Grempenstedt of Pittsburgh Guitars on the south side, and it found its way into Paul's hands by a famous third party.
We deal in vintage and cool guitars, and this certainly is one of each. So we heard that the guitar was for sale, and we bought it. And eventually we sold it to Rick Nielsen in Cheap Trick. He in turn sold it to Paul McCartney.
Well, Carl himself says he's a big McCartney fan and managed to get tickets for tonight's concert to be able to see Paul play that guitar firsthand.
That's Night Beat for this Sunday. Our next news in 1/2 hour on our 24-hour news source.
Before we go tonight, we leave you with some more of the Paul McCartney concert. Have a nice night.
Good night.
Hello, I'm Ron Jay.
And I'm Della Cruz. Topping our news this noon, Paul McCartney rocks the Civic Arena.
Well, last night the rock and roll legend kept his fans happy with a nice mix of old Beatles tunes and his newer material, too.
And Ron, this news may make his fans even happier. There are still a few tickets left for tonight's concert.
Our Andy Gassmeyer is at the arena, and he has some more on Paul McCartney for us. Andy?
And Ron and Della, a few is not to be underscored. As of 9 o'clock this morning, the Civic Arena box office told us they had roughly 300 tickets for tonight's concert, still on sale. But by 11:15, that number had shrunk down to just under 200. And after that, the remainder are on sale here on a first-come, first-served basis, as the box office just opened at 12 noon for those who had not been able to buy their tickets over the phone. One of those who was trying is Ed Angel. Ed Angel from the Keys Rocks had just gone in, tried to buy a ticket. And what kind of success did you have?
I chose not to buy them because they're in E3, which is behind the stage, and they're not very good seats. So I went to the show last night and sat in A25, which were real good seats.
Well, since you went to the show last night, what would you say of the performance?
It was a fantastic performance. He put on a great show. He really did. Probably the best concert I've ever seen here.
Paul McCartney, without the rest of the Beatles, is still a show of his own.
Oh, yes, definitely. He's definitely put on a show. He plays a lot of Beatles music in, too, which brings you back through time.
Okay. And Ron and Della, those sentiments are similar to those expressed by the thousands, roughly 14,000 or so, who attended last night's concert.
Paul McCartney's the greatest thing since Ed Sullivan, 1964.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles.
Not long after that, in their first U.S. tour, they came to Pittsburgh, and the rest is history, as they dominated the music scene throughout the 60s until their breakup in 1970. The Paul McCartney who performed here last night and is scheduled to do so again tonight is like many of his fans graying now, but he hasn't lost his ability to sell a song, as some 14,000 fans learned within minutes after he bounded onto the stage. Now, Ron and Della, there was something said by some who had been to that concert last night to the effect that that is Paul McCartney, isn't quite the same in terms of there being some hoarseness to his voice, some raspiness, but that could be chalked up to the fact that this is just one of many stops on his concert tour, and I can say from having been there last night that he was hoarse a little bit from the moment he stepped on stage. But after that, the old Paul McCartney came back, and you could hear that in songs like Yesterday.
Yeah.
It was a concert well worth seeing and well worth going to.
He might be suffering from the same flu that all of us have been having in this country, all across the country.
Well, it's old age. We're not getting any younger
That's
here.
right.
Well, that's true.
Did any reporters get a chance to talk to him, to Paul McCartney?
Not yet. We're now restricted to talking to him sometime around 4:30 this afternoon during a news conference that is to be held here at the Civic Arena.
Okay, that'll be interesting to see his reaction to Pittsburgh, as a matter of fact, after not being here for all these years.
It was a different city from what he saw when he was here in 1964.
That's
I'm sure of that, Andy.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Okay.
Now, tickets for the McCartney concert cost $28.50, which is not outrageous for rock concerts these days. Let's take a little nostalgic comparison. When Paul last played Pittsburgh, it was 1964, and he was a member of the Fab Four. Tickets for that concert were a mere $5.90. Almost 13,000 fans turned out for the show, which was only 35 minutes long. By contrast, last night's show is 100 minutes long. That's last night and tonight's show. Paul really wanted to perform in our town. He said he picked Pittsburgh over Philly and Cleveland because he says Pittsburgh reminds him of his hometown of Liverpool, England. Front.
Thousands caught McCartney's second act, but apparently McCartney caught something else, perhaps the flu bug. I'm Bonnie Barron, and coming up, I'll have a live report.
The city's new message to street vendors: stay on the move or fines are in your future. I'm Ralph Iannotti, and I'll have that story.
John Steigerwald will have the sports. Good evening. I'm Stacy Smith.
I'm Ray Tannehill. Eyewitness News Update is next. Former Beatle Paul McCartney made it through the second night of his concert stop here in Pittsburgh despite a health problem that came to light earlier today. Bonnie Barron is over at the Civic Arena now with the story. Bonnie?
Right, Paul McCartney was reportedly treated at his hotel room for either the flu or a sore throat, or probably both, if he's got our kind of flu bug. Dr. Joseph Mulvihill of Regent Square was the attending chiropractor who told me earlier today by phone that McCartney was doing super but would not elaborate on any further details. Whatever McCartney is suffering from, he sure didn't share the suffering with his audience. As Paul McCartney's world tour made 2 stops in Pittsburgh, among the many who caught his act may have been an unwelcome visitor, the flu bug. Through 2 sold-out energetic performances, a raspy throat nagged McCartney's high notes. But judging by tonight's crowd, slightly rowdier than last night's, the overall show was the historic heartstopper this over 30 crowd had hoped for. What follows may be more good news for these fans: a live album and film from this tour, and possibly a studio album with this band.
I think we're the band at the moment. If there's going to be another album done, I'm sure we'll get, we'll be the band he takes in, and, first sort of refusal, which will be great. But I don't think we'll get around to it this year. Another, like fresh material.
A little bit younger crowd tonight and a little bit rowdier crowd. What do you think? Do you think he sounded sick too?
I thought the concert was great. He did an excellent job, brought back a lot of memories. He's a legend.
What did you think about his voice tonight?
I thought it was a little raspy, but still, he's still a legend.
He's proven himself in the 90s. He's going
and what do you all think? I think despite the raspy crowd, thanks folks, despite the raspy crowd, it sure was a crowd pleaser. I'm Bonnie Barron reporting live from the Civic Arena. Back to you, Ray and Stacy.
All right, Bonnie, thank you.
Live from Television Hill, this is Channel 11 News Night Beat with David Johnson, Peggy Finnegan, Dennis Bowman with the weather outside, and John Fedko with sports. Now, Channel 11 News Night Beat.
They say the show must go on, and it did tonight at the Civic Arena. Good evening. I'm Peggy Finnegan.
I'm David Johnson. Of course, we're talking about the Paul McCartney concert. For a while this afternoon, some worried the concert might be canceled because the former Beatle apparently has a sore throat, but as Peggy said, the show did go on.
Cynthia Fodor is standing by live now at the arena with more. Cynthia.
Well, Peggy and David, as you said, a lot of folks were worried today after McCartney canceled his press conference, but most of these fans were not disappointed tonight. They say McCartney was hoarse, his voice was a little strained, and he probably wasn't feeling 100%, but he still tried to give it his all.
McCartney fans who couldn't wait for the concert camped outside the Vista Hotel to try to get a glimpse of the superstar. Most were disappointed, but some, like Barry Luber of Philadelphia, got a little too close. He tried to sneak up to McCartney's room.
They asked me to leave, and I tried a couple more times, but they're pretty tough up there. They didn't want anybody on the floor at all.
But overzealous fans weren't McCartney's only concern today. Most noticed at last night's concert the former Beatle had trouble hitting the high notes. He dropped a few old favorites, and James Tamelkoff was disappointed the concert was cut short 15 minutes.
I could tell when I first saw him when he came out, and it sounded kind of rough and kind of hoarse, but you know how many tours he's been on in different cities and stuff like that. I knew that
it'd be kind of rough.
So this afternoon, a doctor showed up at the hotel. A bellman says he brought in vaporizing equipment to treat McCartney. And by the time the rock star arrived at the arena, he indicated he was just fine.
Hey, how you doing? Okay.
So the show went on, much to the delight of the 14,000 fans who packed the arena for a second night in a row.
Pretty good. He was not good last night, but it was, you could tell that he had a sore throat, but he was still good.
He was straining during some of those really high notes, but he came out really well. It was a job well done, I thought. A prolific job by a great songwriter.
So after 2 nights of rock and roll here at the Civic Arena, Paul McCartney can now give his voice a rest. And most of the folks here say they hope they won't have to wait another 26 years before they see him back here in the Berg again. David and Peggy?
All right, that is a long time to wait. Cynthia, live at the Civic Arena. Thank you very much.
Thanks. The Paul McCartney concert has certainly been music to the ears of record stores. Sales of Beatles cassettes and compact discs have been brisk since the tour hit town. This National Record Mart downtown says sales of Beatle music is up about 25%. McCartney's new album, Flowers in the Dirt, is going fast, and to give fans a break, here at the Oasis record shop, there's a $2 discount on all Beatles and McCartney music all this week.
A scratchy throat didn't stop Paul McCartney, and it didn't bother his fans at the Civic Arena last night either. The show went on despite the former Beatles' flu-like symptoms. He has blown town, however. McCartney is now on his way to Massachusetts, where he'll get a chance to rest his voice and recover before performing again.
More than 14,000 Paul McCartney fans will enjoy the moment they've been waiting for. The 47-year-old ex-Beatle last played at the Civic Arena in 1964 with the legendary rock band. McCartney will play here for 2 nights, making this his only stop in Pennsylvania on his current tour. Joining us now live from the Civic Arena are Yvonne Zanos and Vince Gerasoli with more on this McCartney mania. Yvonne, Vince?
Well, Sheila, you know, it's been called the concert of the year, and it's been playing to rave reviews in packed arenas in this country since it opened about 3 months ago, and tonight will obviously be no exception. Folks are lining up here an hour before the doors open and 2 hours before the concert begins. The concert was, of course, sold out the very day that the tickets went on sale here in Pittsburgh, not only for tonight's performance, but for tomorrow's. And, of course, that comes as no real surprise, considering that the appeal of Paul McCartney and the Beatles spans the generation. And I understand that Vince Gerasoli here got a taste of Beatles or Paul McCartney mania this afternoon, or both.
That's right, both, because when you do think of Paul McCartney, you obviously think of the Beatles and of all those screaming fans that were always trying to reach out and get a touch of one of them. Well, today we had a chance to reach out and touch Paul McCartney. Paul McCartney hasn't played lead guitar on tour since his Beatle days, and in just a few hours, about 14,000 Pittsburghers will be able to catch him in the act once again.
And on this day of the big concert, Paul McCartney took time out to meet with us. Pittsburgh, meet Paul McCartney. McCartney showed us through the family's Highland Park home and paused a moment to reflect on the impact of such a famous name.
I would get phone calls from kids asking me when my next album was going to be released or whatever, kiddingly.
When is your next album going to be released?
It's not, because I don't sing very well at all.
Of course, we wanted to know what Paul McCartney's personal album collection was really like. McCartney graciously obliged.
What would you like to hear? We have...
Well, some Beatles records.
I don't have any Beatles records. I'm sorry.
We also had a chance to talk one-on-one about McCartney's favorite Beatles hit.
I don't know. I like Hey Jude.
All right. This is really Paula McCartney. Her husband, Tom, gave her the nickname Paul, and it kind of stuck. She, however, doesn't call him Linda. The marriage, according to Paula, was worth losing a maiden name like Masiosi.
It's fun. It's fun. People remember my name.
Now, Paula told us she won't be at tonight's concert, but she said if Paul McCartney does have time, she'd like to have him and some of his friends over for dinner. I wonder if he's listening, Yvonne.
I don't know. I want to introduce you to a couple of fans. I was telling you that people got here a full hour before the doors opened. You were here an hour and a half before on this cold, cold night. Why so early?
Well, we just wanted to make sure that we beat a lot of the traffic in, but there was a couple from Ohio behind us in line, and they've been here since 1 o'clock this afternoon.
Now, you two both grew up in Pittsburgh, but I understand neither one of you made the first concert back in '64.
No, I tried, but they turned me away because I was too young.
What about you? Why weren't you here the first time? About the same. Did your parents let you come? No, they wouldn't let me come. So this time you have a chance to join in on the excitement. What are you, a Beatles fan or a McCartney on his own, or both?
A little bit of both.
Yeah, big night for you?
Right. Well, tonight, and I'll be here again tomorrow with a buddy of mine.
Well, that's great. Obviously, not only is Pittsburgh looking forward to Paul McCartney, we understand that Paul McCartney is looking forward to Pittsburgh. He did ask to come and play here. He says it reminds him of his hometown of Liverpool, England, and he says it's filled with people with ordinary people with family values and working class ethics. It's also obviously filled with people real excited about the concert tonight. We'll keep you posted on that later in the show. With Vince Gerasoli, I'm Yvonne Zanos reporting live from the Civic Arena.
All right, thanks, Yvonne.
O'clock. Everybody's getting here early. Some say they don't want to miss a second. Others heard that an additional 350 tickets went on sale this afternoon. The concert starts at 8 tonight. It starts again at 8 o'clock tomorrow night. And we understand there is no opening act, so this is pure Paul McCartney. About half of the 29 songs he'll be performing are vintage Beatle, about half new Paul McCartney, so there's lots for old and new fans to enjoy. And, of course, we'll tell you all about the excitement tonight at 11. Sheila?
And then talking about the Beatles. Hello, everyone. I'm Cynthia Fodor.
And I'm Bill Martin. The Beatles played the Civic Arena in 1964, about 26 years ago. But a lot has changed since then, and a now 47-year-old Paul McCartney is back.
It's McCartney's first major tour since 1976. Our Keith James is at the Civic Arena now, where the band is warming up for one of 2 sold-out shows. Keith, what's happening there?
Cynthia, I just wish some of the warm-up inside would come outside. It is brisk outside here. Nonetheless, McCartney maniacs have been on hand since mid-afternoon, waiting for that slightest glimpse of their musical hero. And they got that glimpse about 40 minutes ago when McCartney and his entourage arrived in a long, white stretch limousine from their downtown hotel. They are inside the arena right now, and they are continuing with their sound check. It should be done momentarily, and as you may be able to see behind me, these McCartney fans are waiting for a glimpse of Paul on his way out, and as has been his habit on this tour, he will roll down the window and wave to all of the fans, and they'll all scream, "I got a glimpse of his hand." We had a glimpse of a lot more than just Paul's hand. We had a glimpse of what he's meant to so many people, in particular the McCartney maniacs who didn't bother to brave the weather, but had a particular party to celebrate as they got ready for the big shows tonight or tomorrow. This party that we see occurred on the north side. There were many like it throughout the Pittsburgh area. Fans celebrating the fact that this McCartney tour is bringing back memories from when they were kids, memories of when the Beatles toured and arrived here in Pittsburgh, memories of McCartney's last tour in '76, and, of course, memories of shows that some of them said to me they've already seen when Paul was in Chicago, for instance, and made some of his other stops. But, of course, he's here in Pittsburgh. He has the show sold out tonight starting at 8, and, of course, the show tomorrow night as well. And we will be here live at 11 tonight on Channel 11 to give you a review, if you will, of the Paul McCartney concert.
Keith, no doubt the scalpers will be out tonight. I heard in some cities tickets going for as much as $600.
Not the case here in Pittsburgh. Scalpers told me that the best they've been able to get is about $80 or so, Bill, and they expect that price to drop down to maybe $40, $45 just before showtime. Maybe contributing to that is the fact that there's 2 shows here at the arena tonight and tomorrow, and also the fact that just before, maybe 5 o'clock, they opened the gates here, and there were a handful of tickets, several hundred, that went on sale at the normal price.
McCartney's back. All right. Thank you.
Have fun tonight, Keith.
Well, the
sight tonight of the return of Paul McCartney to Pittsburgh. Of course, last time in the 60s, he brought 3 other guys with him. Well, Paul's still rocking, and although he's changed, people are still packing arenas to hear him sing. And if you look around town, you'll see all sorts of Beatle memorabilia, like these Beatle dolls, or this bigger-than-life poster on display at Record Rama Sound Archives in the North Hills. The original owner sold the poster to Paul Mulwiney, the store owner.
This was awarded to her on stage by Chuck Brinkman when the Beatles appeared in Pittsburgh, the one and only time.
And families are making an event of the concert. The Crusham family will go tomorrow night. Kyle is 11, and he doesn't only like the McCartney of today.
I listen to Abbey Road and the White Album, some of the other ones.
His 14-year-old brother Todd says, forget the groups of today, just bring on Paul McCartney.
I like his, just most stuff the Wings did, and all the Beatles stuff, and I like his newer stuff too, like Flowers in the Dirt.
Now, they may have been influenced a bit by their dad, Mike, the GM of 3WS Radio here in town. In fact, he may be the most excited.
There's going to be a press conference. I hope to get to meet Paul McCartney earlier that day, so I'll be so pumped by then I won't be able to stand it.
But they have to wait for tomorrow. These fans were camping out today in hopes of getting a glimpse of McCartney. Lynn Carson screamed as a Beatles fan in the 60s. Do you plan to scream here tonight?
I am going to scream.
I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot of the new music in the next couple of days, but the people in the audience will be asking for a lot of the songs that he performed with this group in the past. Vince DeLisi, Channel 11 News.
After tomorrow's show, the McCartney tour moves on to Boston.
Well, if you were a teenager in the 60s, you may remember the last time Paul McCartney played Pittsburgh. It was 1964, and he was performing with the Beatles. The Fab Four sang to a sold-out crowd at the Civic Arena. That performance was only 35 minutes long. And for an idea of just how much has changed since then, tickets for that 1964 Beatles concert cost a mere $5.90. Almost 13,000 screaming fans attended the show. For the 1990 McCartney show, tickets cost $28.50, but the price didn't stop fans. The arena is sold out, and 28,000 tickets were grabbed up by fans. Now, McCartney's appearance in Pittsburgh is kind of special. He specifically told his agent he wants to play our town because it reminds him of his own working-class hometown of Liverpool, England.
Hours, Paul McCartney will bring his music and a lot of nostalgia back to the Civic Arena during his second sellout concert. Jim Scott has been checking into reports that McCartney has a touch of the flu and strained vocal cords. Jim, what's the latest?
Well, the latest is, Don, that the show will go on tonight. Flu symptoms and strained vocal cords and all. McCartney will sing, and that was music to the ears of the people who were out here. What a difference a half an hour makes. A little while ago, no one here at the Civic Arena, but now the lines are starting to form. It's been a long time since he performed here. 1964. A lot of these people weren't even born the last time he sang here as one of the Beatles. Are there any tickets left for the show? Well, I can tell you this. The scalpers are out here tonight selling tickets to the people who want to come in. Others are choosing to wait in line. They're over at gate number 1. Hoping to cash in on some of those last-minute tickets that may free up. You came from Alexandria, Virginia without a ticket, but you got lucky?
Yes, sir. I think Paul saved a few to keep the scalpers away.
All the radio stations and everywhere, and the record outlet, and they said there was nothing left. That was my husband, so I'm trying again tonight myself without him. He's home. So if I get tickets, I'll have to call him and tell him to come into town. He doesn't know I'm here, though. He's waiting for me to come home.
John Marston of Whitehall. Well, your wife hasn't gotten the tickets yet. She's still up in line hoping to cash in on some. All around us out here, music of Paul McCartney, the Beatles music being played, every radio station in town almost here, and everyone waiting to go inside and have a good night of music. Live in front of the Civic Arena, I'm Jim Scott. Back to you, Don.
It is now T-minus about 90 minutes to the sellout show at the Civic Arena. Paul McCartney wraps up the Pittsburgh part of his world tour tonight. Jim Scott is standing by with a concert update. Jim?
Don, I wish this were yesterday, no pun intended, when it was a little warmer, but they just opened the gates and people have started to flow into the Civic Arena. The crowd is swelling out here. And some more good news. Those folks who were waiting by gate number 1 to get some tickets were coming out. Everyone was happy. They say, hey, some tickets did free up. They sold them to us. We're in great shape. They're all ready for the concert here tonight. Of course, McCartney supposedly suffering from some symptoms of the flu and some strained vocal cords, but he'll sing. He'll be here live at the Civic Arena. This band is on the run. I'm Jim Scott.
Okay, thank you, Jim. That's WTAE 4 News at 6. ABC's World News Tonight is coming up next.
We'll see you at 11. Have a good evening.
Captions newscast has been a presentation of WTAE 4 News.
Is CBS.
Paul McCartney took over the Civic Arena tonight. I'm out here with his fans. They tell me the show was perfect. I'm Dave Clark. I'll have a live report.
Also coming up on Eyewitness News Update, thousands attend an anti-communist rally in Moscow. More trouble in the Middle East as gunmen open fire on a bus filled with Israeli tourists.
In sports, there was a great comeback in the final round of the World Caribbean Classic in Key Biscayne, Florida. Bob Pompiani will tell us about that, and John Luffin will have the weather. Good evening. I'm Vicki Yates-Orr.
I'm Ron Klink. Eyewitness News Update is next.
From KDK TV2. This is Eyewitness News Update.
Good evening. Pittsburgh was rocking tonight when superstar songwriter and performer Paul McCartney stepped onto stage to start a two-night concert at the Civic Arena. Fans came out in full force to see the ex-Beatle perform here in Pittsburgh as part of a $26 million tour. Our Dave Clark is at the Civic Arena now to give us a look and all the excitement behind tonight's concert. David, what do you have for us?
Ron, I'm surrounded by all the fans, well, some of the fans who were inside enjoying the show. It was a fascinating show. Paul McCartney did what everyone expected. He turned on the crowd, and as you'll see by the tape now, everybody enjoyed the show. Yeah! McCartney fans by the thousands lined up outside the Civic Arena. The line stretched down the street. Then everybody packed inside, clamoring for a seat.
I was not born in the Beatle era, and I am here because I love the Beatles.
I saw them here 25 years ago, 4 months, 21 days, and about 7 minutes. I was here, I sat up there with my dad. I've been waiting that long to see him back here in Pittsburgh.
One of my goals in life was to see a Paul McCartney show, so it's happening, yeah.
And there he was, live. Paul McCartney and his band, including his wife, backing him up, and thousands of fans in front of him screaming for him to sing. McCartney came out rocking.
Why can't we travel up continuous life? Make love coming all the time. Up and down the hills I go. I gotta know.
The lights, the lasers, the band, the stage. This is a $26 million production that includes a 14-minute film before the show starts, tracing the musical climb of Paul McCartney. Tonight, his voice was a little raspy, but he's still Paul McCartney.
I was 8 years old when they came to Baltimore, Maryland in '64, and I was too young then, and this time I wasn't going to miss it. I think he's fantastic. To be perfectly honest, I prefer George, but I'm not going to say that right now. Enough!
Well, Amanda may not like Paul, but hey, Paul can only say let it be. I'm going to take a quick informal survey. Everybody, how was the show tonight? Okay. They love the show. Ron and Vicki, back to you in the studio.
Dave, you asked the question. We will, of course, have more on this concert later on in this newscast.
I guess they liked it.
Well, it's time now to go back to the Civic Arena where that Paul McCartney concert just ended moments ago. That's where we find Evening Magazine's Jimmy and Steve. Fellas, what can you tell us?
Well, it was a tremendous concert here. Most of the crowd has left. The concert got off to a bit of a slow start tonight, and that's not because he did some solo songs.
Yeah, Paul came out, and his first words as he looked soulfully into the crowd's eyes were, "People of Detroit, you're not."
But it picked up from there. His voice is a bit rough tonight, but not as bad as the other 14,000 people who were singing along on every single Beatles song tonight.
We carried him, actually.
Yeah, we did. I kept my eyes on Linda quite a bit of the night. Her hands actually hovered over the keyboard a lot of the time. I don't think they made contact with the keyboard at any time.
Actually, Linda McCartney's AMC was not plugged in at any time during the show.
But it was a tremendous show here at the Civic Arena tonight. And Paul said he's going to be coming back, right?
Oh, yes. Paul said as his last words, see you next time. We're 26 years since the previous time. We'll see him in 2016.
We'll be here. Back to you guys.
Any truth to the fact we understand with 14,000 people singing the Beatles songs, they asked you two to quit singing, you were throwing the crowd off key?
Paul was pointing and looking kind of nastily at us.
We were great, though. We were just incredible.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, that is it for this edition of Eyewitness News.
Our next report tomorrow morning at 6:30 on the Wake Up with Larry Richards show. Now stay tuned for Hawaii 5-0.
From all of us here at Eyewitness News, good night.
I gotta know. Why can't we travel up continuous life? Make love coming all the time. Up and down the hills I go. I gotta know. Is it better to love one another than to go out walk in the dark? Yeah. Is it better to love?
KDKA TV2 Pittsburgh, a Group W Westinghouse broadcasting station.
Yeah, we better take good care of each other. Avoid slipping back.
By live outside where the folks are already arriving for tonight's sold-out concert. Jim, what's the latest?
Oh, yeah, they are, Don. And if he's battling the flu, then Pittsburghers are going to win the battle because the show definitely will go on. It's night number 2 for Paul McCartney here in Pittsburgh, and it looks like night number 2 for a sellout crowd at the Civic Arena. There are some people back there by the box office, gate number 1, hoping to get some last-minute tickets. They may be lucky, maybe not. The scalpers are also busy out here selling tickets for as much as $30, $40. But there was a fellow from West Virginia who said he's been up here for both nights, and he says he's had no trouble getting tickets at the last minute, so perhaps some tickets will free up. Of course, the last time McCartney played Pittsburgh, 1964. He was but a lad of 21 years old with a group that was world famous then. John Lennon, George Harrison, Ringo Starr, they made up the Beatles. And even though the group has long since been broken up, McCartney mania is still alive and well in these parts. Ken Rice has a report.
It was almost too good to be true. Tickets for Paul McCartney's second Pittsburgh show, sold out for weeks, suddenly available this morning. Just a couple hundred squeezed in at the last minute, and fans squeezed into the Civic Arena all morning to snatch them up. The only seats available today are located behind the stage, but no one here seems to care.
Anywhere we can get in there as long as we're in the building.
I gotta know.
This is what awaits them tonight. McCartney and wife Linda performing new material and, of course, many of the old Beatle classics.
Yeah, you got that something. I think you'll understand.
That was 1964, the year of the Fab Four's first and last trip to Pittsburgh. Diane Vogel was at the Civic Arena back then, and she'll be there tonight, too.
I just cried the whole time they were on stage, and Paul was the one that I loved, so I had to come and see this again.
We found someone else with memories of 1964, a reporter's reporter who, under mild duress, admits what he asked of the then fledgling superstars at a pre-concert news conference.
I said to either one of them directly or perhaps to the group, well, what are you going to do when the bubble bursts? And Lennon became inflamed, and he said, the bubble burst? What do you think? When's the bubble going to burst? How do you know that? And he just launched into this diatribe against me because I had suggested that this wasn't going to go on forever.
Ever since, Lynch has wisely stuck to reporting what's already happened rather than predicting what will. And the Beatles bubble, a quarter of a century later, still seems in no danger of bursting.
I didn't pursue that line of questioning.
Ken Rice, WTAE 4 News.
Surprisingly, not a lot of people out here just yet. What is a surprise is a lot of music and radio stations. I'll tell you about that later on at 6 o'clock. Pittsburgh, the next to the last stop on the tour, good thing too, because as we reported earlier, McCartney suffering some flu-like symptoms. Live in front of the Civic Arena, I'm Jim Scott. Back to you, Don.
Our report Sam Note with the latest on Mario's pain in his back.
And Dennis Bowman has a milder turn in his AccuWeather forecast. That's all now on Channel 11 News at 6.
This is Channel 11, WPXI TV, Pittsburgh. Live from Television Hill, this is Channel 11 News. With David Johnson, Peggy Finnegan, Dennis Bowman with the weather outside, and Sam Nova with sports. Now, Channel 11 News.
Good evening. I'm Peggy Finnegan.
I'm David Johnson. Our top story tonight at 6, McCartney Mania Day 2. Thousands of people heading to the Civic Arena right now to hear the last Pittsburgh concert of a musical legend. This was the scene just moments ago tonight as McCartney and his entourage, Paul McCartney, rolled up to the Civic Arena. McCartney rolling down his window to say hi to his fans. This is the second and last concert of his Pittsburgh leg of his world tour. Tonight's concert was jeopardized by the former Beatles' ill health, but he will go on with the show.
Well, Andy Gasmeyer's live at the arena tonight. He has more on the McCartney story. Hi, Andy.
Hi, Peggy. For a while today, it appeared that these Paul McCartney fans lined up here in the freezing cold for the start of tonight's 8 o'clock performance might be left out in the cold in more ways than one, as the man they've come to see wasn't feeling all that well. Shortly before noon, as fans lined up to buy the few tickets that were left for tonight's performance,
Not one spare one anywhere.
word came down that Paul McCartney was having throat problems and had canceled the late afternoon news conference. At times, during last night's performance, he appeared to be struggling, as his voice sounded hoarse and raspy, a condition chalked up to the demands of the world tour he began last fall. But later in the day, at the Vista Hotel where McCartney is staying, there surfaced the possibility tonight's performance could be scrubbed, as a doctor driving this vehicle with Ohio license plates arrived to make a house call on the Beatles legend. Fans waited for a glimpse of the rock star and made it clear it wasn't too much to expect.
I'm sure McCartney understands how the fans feel, but the other side of him is probably a pinch worried also about Looney Tunes on the run, you know.
I have an innocent face. I'm not going to hurt anybody. I just want to talk to the musical legend.
While they waited, hotel and limousine service employees revealed McCartney had not been feeling well and had vaporizing equipment brought up to his room on the 26th floor. So when the doctor who attended to him for 2 hours left late this afternoon under tight security arrangements, a hotel guard drove his vehicle to a side door exit, there was real concern the show would not go on.
How's the patient? Is he okay?
And in case you couldn't make it out, the thumbs up there was given to us by a man described as Dr. Joseph Mollenville. And since he left, both the publicist, McCartney's publicist in New York City, and the promoters of this tour have guaranteed us that, in fact, the show will go on with Paul McCartney starring. David and Peggy, back to you.
Andy, very quickly, he went about 2 hours last night. Is there any indication because of his health he may go a shorter concert tonight?
David, I'm barely hearing you because of an audio breakup problem we're having, but the show, I think, as you indicated, was about 2 hours and 15 minutes long last night. It was nonstop, a solid performance, a taxing demand on any performer, no less one who might be having throat problems at this particular time, but there is no reason to suspect at this point in time it won't go that long tonight.
All right, Andy Gasmeyer, thank you very much. At the Civic Arena live tonight.
We're going to hear from one of Paul's managers just in town tonight for the concert tomorrow night. We'll be right back. We're at Riverfront Coliseum as the stage gets the final touches for the Paul McCartney concert tomorrow night. Tonight, our cameras caught up with Paul's manager as he arrived at Cincinnati's airport. He says Paul's ready to go on stage and ready to put on a great show. And as manager Richard Ogden says, McCartney's a great guy.
What do you like to work with? A charming man and very professional. And everyone in Cincinnati is going to see just how talented tomorrow. Yeah. How's his throat? His throat's fine.
There you heard it. His throat's fine. Eric Warren. Paul McCartney sellout concert due to kick off tomorrow at 8 over at the Coliseum. Yeah.
You know,
he looks good. He's in his 40s, right? Paul McCartney?
I can't wait to see him because, you know, I mean, I wish I would have been old enough to see the Beatles.
Eric has tickets? You have tickets, Eric?
Got tickets, and I don't remember the Beatles. I'm too young to remember when they were around. If you believe that, you'll believe it's going to rain tomorrow. I don't think it's going to rain tomorrow. A few sprinkles in the tri-state right now, but Paul, that's...
Okay, Channel 5, take it easy.
Paul McCartney rocks the heck out of Riverfront Coliseum, and he stops to talk exclusively with News 5.
Magic tonight at Riverfront Coliseum.
the former Beatle has just wrapped up an explosive 2.5-hour concert.
Before it all got started, McCartney talked exclusively to News 5's John London.
John is live now near the Coliseum to tell us they even talked about a Beatles reunion. John, what an interview.
Yeah, we did. We touched on that subject. We caught up with him backstage about 90 minutes before tonight's show, a show which is just letting out. The traffic is heading out now. This was the hottest ticket in town tonight at Riverfront Coliseum, and I think you can probably well understand why. McCartney singing songs of yesterday, but as he explains, those songs have a mighty fresh sound to him.
A lot of them we never toured with. A lot of them we just recorded, and by the time we were ready to kind of tour with them, we'd broken up as a touring band, and we're just recording. So things like Hey Jude and Sgt. Pepper and Fool on the Hill are like brand new songs to me. It's very nice.
That is McCartney backstage, and this is McCartney on stage. Opening with Figure of Eight from his new Flowers in the Dirt album, then giving his legion of fans some musical nostalgia from his days with the Beatles. That is what brings people in their 40s to a rock concert in the 90s.
It's the music. It's the music. It's remembering buying the White Album when I was 15 years old. It's that kind of thing.
It is the kind of thing Cincinnatians remember from the last time McCartney was here, selling out Cincinnati Gardens with a group that revolutionized music. McCartney telling us tonight his touring in the mid-60s is all a blur. The guys in his new band seem to like the old songs as much as the fans from those days.
You know, I used to play some of them, so it's kind of fun to play them again, you know, but to be playing them with Paul. Only now he's doing the parts that I used to do.
As for the possibility of a musical reunion with the remaining Beatles...
No, I mean, the thing is, you know, I'm sure I'll get back together with George and Ringo and play some music, but everyone then says, oh, it's a Beatles reunion, and obviously without John there could never be that kind of thing. But I'm sure we'll get back together and play some music some point.
So there you have it from Paul McCartney. When we were interviewing him tonight, he was holding a cup of English tea for his throat, for his voice. He's been having voice problems, as you know. They even had to postpone tomorrow night's Lexington concert until April because of voice problems. Members of the band telling me tonight that they've spaced things out a little bit more now to make it less of a grind, less of a strain. So that's it. The show's out. Everybody had a good time. Reporting live from the Coliseum, I'm John London, News 5.
John, this was the most exciting assignment you've ever had. Wasn't it?
Maybe so.
Definitely. You know, John caught up with Paul McCartney. He was so impressed that Paul McCartney was just so willing to talk to him, and seems to be a great guy.
Certainly want to thank him for that Channel 5 plug.
Yeah, great.
We'll be playing that a couple of times.
Sure.
We all know what impact Paul McCartney has had on shaping the music in our world. Now he's having an impact on saving the environment in the world. McCartney takes time out during his concerts to address issues like pollution, the ozone, and global warming. He's doing it all on behalf of an international group called Friends of the Earth. The head of that group tells News 5's Curtis Fuller McCartney is the biggest promotion for his organization.
And one of the things he does, he talks about us in his program, and then he sings Let It Be, which is his way of saying we've got to let the earth live. We can't keep interfering with the natural cycles of life. I think that's really his message.
Clark tells us membership in his group has gone way up since McCartney got on the bandwagon. And ironically, Clark says he first saw the Beatles right here in Cincinnati back in 1964.
In other news now, Coleraine
McCartney last toured, so fans are hungry to see and hear the ex-Beatle rock and roll again. Especially a group Eyewitness Phil's Mary Krukow ran into today. These women met during a McCartney concert years ago, and today they were on a mission to meet the music man himself.
These were fans on the run. Women admittedly obsessed with a man they fell in love with during their teeny bopper years.
Well, I've been doing this for like 25 years, and I'm not going to stop now. You know, there's no stopping now.
They spent 2 days tracking down when and where Paul McCartney would first step foot in Cincinnati. Then they staked out a private landing strip on the backside of the Greater Cincinnati International Airport, just for a chance to get a glimpse of their precious Paul.
I just want to see Paul. If it's just for 1 second, you know, just a wave or something, that's all.
Barbara Tyler is 37 years old. Her husband thinks she's crazy. After all, another man's picture fills her wallet. But like the rest of the groupies, Barbara has waited 13 years for McCartney to tour again, and his fans don't want to miss one precious moment. What's the craziest thing you've ever done to try to see Paul McCartney?
Almost got myself killed in a cab in Chicago. Chicago, beat on the guy, drive, drive. I talked to my mother today, and she goes, you mean you just came here in Cincinnati to see him? Not me. And I'm going, Mom, I mean, you know. And she goes, you're haunting that man still? I said, Mom, the man's haunting me for 37 years. You know, why not?
Well, apparently the women did get their wish. We understand that Paul landed just moments ago at the airport, and they apparently did get a very good look. And we will find out who won those last 2 tickets to the McCartney show a little bit later in this
Cincinnati Airport just a few minutes ago. We had a crew out there and got some pictures, in fact, of McCartney arriving at the airport, his first arrival in Cincinnati. You can see him there in the red getting into the limousine. There he is facing the camera. It's his first arrival in Cincinnati since 1976 was the last time he was here. You know, so many people are looking forward to this show that a group of die-hard fans have been standing outside the Coliseum all afternoon hoping to catch a glimpse of McCartney. And for many of them, there he is there giving the sign and the wave. For many of those fans watching and waiting for him at the Coliseum, it won't be the first time they've seen him.
Well, we followed the tour in '76, so we were lucky enough to meet him in New York just by standing outside the hotel he was staying at.
You're trying it again?
We're trying it again. Not much luck this time.
Well, this is much more than just a rock and roll show. It's a good chance to experience a lot of your the music that was sort of the background for your whole lifetime.
How many times in all have you seen Paul and the Beatles?
The Beatles once, Paul, without a calculator, I'm not sure. 17 and 76 and 21 times, and then we saw Ringo once, saw George Harrison twice.
You know, some of these fans have been following McCartney all over the United States and have driven to Cincinnati from as far away as New York and Atlanta just to see this show. How popular is the ex-Beatle now? Well, look at this. Look at these ticket prices. They were originally $28.50 for tonight's show, now $100 for upper seats, $375. That's right, we found one ticket for sale in the third row for $375 today. That was from scalpers. So obviously that Beatle magic is still very much alive. If you're lucky enough to have a ticket for tonight's show, it's expected to be a great one with a lot of Beatles songs mixed in with a lot of McCartney's newer songs. We'll be here this evening. We'll have a full report coming up on the news at 11 o'clock. This is John Mattery reporting live from the Coliseum. Back to you, Carol.
John, I'm just curious, most of the fans you're seeing coming in, are they over 30 or what are you seeing, a mixture?
Well, a lot of those fans that were waiting here already were upper 20s, mid-30s. They were real Beatles fans from before. But I think tonight we're going to get a lot of young people as well who are just kind of discovering the Beatles music now.
All right, thanks, John.
$300, I think I'd buy a...
Speaking of waiting, it took 14 years, but Paul McCartney finally came back to Cincinnati, playing to a full house at Riverfront Coliseum tonight. The concert capped off a day of McCartney mania that started when the former Beatle hit town this afternoon. John Mattery is standing by live now with a report on all the hysteria. How was it, John?
Well, Carol, the concert just let out a few minutes ago, and judging by the expression on a lot of faces around here, the show was well worth the price of admission. Now, for most people here, this was the closest they'll ever get to seeing the Beatles, and so tonight for them was a trip down memory lane. The long and winding road of Paul McCartney's 1990 tour finally came to Cincinnati tonight as the former Beatle arrived at the greater Cincinnati airport just before 6. It was McCartney's first chance to get back to Cincinnati since 1976. Though outside the Coliseum, it was almost a scene from 1966, with dozens of loyal fans eagerly waiting for a chance to glimpse McCartney and his band on the run as they arrived. It was such an emotional experience for some, they wiped tears from their eyes after seeing the legendary performer drive by. For them, they can never see McCartney too many times.
Saw him in Chicago 3 times this past year, and saw him 17 times when he toured with Wings in '76.
For others, this was an opportunity to relive their teenage years when they were screaming Beatles fans.
Yeah, it's reliving our childhood for a week or so, you know, then you go back to the real world and be an adult again.
These were the hottest tickets in town tonight, and scalpers were asking up to $375 a seat before the show. The price was soon forgotten. Cheers rang out outside the Coliseum as guards opened the door and let them in. And sooner than you could say Lonely Hearts Club Band, it was showtime.
Well, you got me dancing in a figure of eight.
Oh, you don't get any bigger than him. He's great. He's number one.
He's the best. He's the only one. He's a genius.
Why can't we travel up continuous line?
And, well, you may remember that McCartney canceled his Lexington concert last night because he was having troubles with his voice in the past few weeks. How did his voice hold up tonight? Well, we'll leave that to our entertainment critic, Craig Kopp. He'll be along just a little bit later in the newscast with a full review of the concert. This is John Matteries reporting live from the Coliseum. Back to you, Randy and Carol.
Well, John, is that for you, John, do you think?
I'm sorry, we have so many screaming people here, I just can't hear you, Carol.
John, I just wanted to ask you what you thought of the concert. You're a musician.
Oh, yeah, I was in there for a few songs at the beginning before we had to get to work, and it was great seeing him. It was, in a way, like seeing the Beatles again.
Okay, thanks a lot, John. I would have liked to have seen that.
Would have been nice. Right now, Paul McCartney is heading back to the airport. He will get on his little executive jet that he flew in on and fly to Indianapolis. He's not even staying here in Cincinnati tonight.
Oh, it's too bad.
Yeah.
Well, still ahead in a
past their importance, but we persist because this is personal. Rock and roll's greatest performer will wear no crown, of course, for there's no championship to be fought over by contemporaries, no relevant statistics to be measured in terms of comparisons with past greats. Indeed, the title of rock's greatest is held only in our individual minds, and yet we argue intensely because it's our own history we're talking about. You see, whomever you think's the greatest, the chances are it's someone whose prime coincides with our youth. I suspect it's because our teens and young adult years are clearly when pop music is most significant to us. And maybe that's because that's when we're falling in love or trying to or dealing most vigorously with relationships. And the radio, or today MTV and CDs and tapes, become the background music to life. Indeed, for most Americans, their favorite performer probably is someone who was big in their senior year in high school. And yes, there must be exceptions, because I'm not willing to say Bobby Vinton singing Roses Are Red was the best ever. But generally, it's no accident that those who think Sinatra's the king are kind of older, and those who swear that Elvis still lives probably were teens in the 50s. And if it's Springsteen or Michael Jackson that gets the nod, we're looking at the class of the late 70s or early 80s. But let me settle the uncertainty with the same lack of objectivity I normally reserve for these commentaries by suggesting that the man who graced the stage at the Coliseum last night was part of the creative genius that made up the greatest musical group of the century, the greatest rock group of all time, the Beatles. Their music changed the industry, changed rock and roll, indeed changed Western culture in terms of style, attitudes, and the politics of youth. And 100 years from now, their music will still be played even by symphony orchestras who are already playing it. There have been better musicians, better singers, better writers. But nobody could do it all with such impact while leaving a mark of such longevity. There'll be no reunion tours, of course. A crazed assassin saw to that. But those of us old enough to remember can never forget that where music has always been the language of the generation, the Beatles were the one group that created and shaped a generation, which is why no concert ever sold out faster. And why, when Paul McCartney sang yesterday, we knew it was forever. A little later, a look at the Paul McCartney tour that will soon rock Cincinnati.
Former Beatle Paul McCartney and his boys are once again a band on the run. Tonight, McCartney kicked off the second leg of his U.S. tour with a rock and roll extravaganza in Detroit. Here is what it sounded like. Yes, the former member of the Fab Four is bringing his show to Cincinnati. He'll be at Riverfront Coliseum on Monday, February 12th. If you want tickets, you better know somebody in the band, or you better know a good ticket scalper, because for this superstar, every seat in the place is sold out. Not too many seats. What, 14, 16,000 tickets?
Yeah, and they set a record like in the first 19 minutes or so, the whole thing was sold out. Well, there are all kinds of young superstars making names for them.
Last night's sellout crowd at Riverfront Coliseum are probably talking nonstop about Paul McCartney today. The former Beatle brought his world tour to Cincinnati, and judging from the reaction of his many fans, it was a night to remember. News 5's John Lennon got a chance to interview McCartney before the show, and he spent some time backstage as well. Quite a thrill.
We got to talk to band members, and then McCartney came by, walking by after a sound check on stage, and we got in a couple of questions about his voice, his music, a possible reunion with George Harrison and Ringo Starr. Here's part of what he had to say about an hour or so before the big show.
I'm sure I'll get back together with George and Ringo and play some music, but everyone then says, oh, it's a Beatles reunion, and obviously without John there could never be that kind of thing. But I'm sure we'll get back together and play some music some point.
It's been a hard day's night.
Anyone who remembers the excitement McCartney and the Beatles created in the 1960s will be happy to hear that. It would be the kind of thing that gives a sense of time and history and moment. At this moment, McCartney and his specially formed World Tour band are going hell for leather, as they put it, pushing Paul's new material like last night's opener, Figure of Eight. But much of the show features many of the songs that makes McCartney special.
A lot of them we never toured with. A lot of them we just recorded, and by the time we were ready to kind of tour with them, we'd broken up as a touring band, and we're just recording. So things like Hey Jude and Sgt. Pepper and Fool on the Hill are like brand new songs to me. It's very nice.
McCartney's in Indianapolis tonight. Originally, he was supposed to perform in Lexington a couple nights ago, but that concert was postponed to give the band more time to rest their voices, something they all said was needed. In fact, when we talked with McCartney last night, he was holding a cup of tea, nursing his throat.
Looking at the interview that you had with him, I was so amazed that he seemed so accessible and so easygoing.
He was certainly nice enough to take a moment and stop by and talk to us as he was moving backstage, something he clearly did not have to do.
A very nice guy and a good interview.
Yeah,
thanks a lot, John.
Earlier today, I got John London's autograph just talking to Paul. You're my hero, John. That's great. Up next, one of the largest investment firms in the country is Bank.
Star of the Paul McCartney Cincinnati concert.
And our family entertainment critic, JB, joins us once again with the latest on what's happening out at the Coliseum. JB?
Hi, Rob and Deborah. Well, we're getting ready for the assembled multitudes here. The police have set up some barricades out here on the plaza level to keep the people back who don't have tickets. And the doors will be opening in just about an hour down here at Riverfront Coliseum. Earlier this afternoon, Paul McCartney's plane did land at Greater Cincinnati Airport. And he's in the building right now. They've already had a sound check, and that's good news for the concert goers because it looks like this show will start on time, a rarity in concert history anywhere, including in Cincinnati. 8 o'clock tonight. We'll be inside for the first couple of songs. We'll bring you some of that tonight at 11 and also have a review for you as well.
Boy, he really landed late, JB. Any indication if he's going to be in town for a while, or is he flying right out after the concert?
In the other shows that he's done, Deborah, he's stuck around the city for a day and done some interesting side trips. I don't know if he plans to stay in Cincinnati. He's doing Indianapolis, you know, for 2 shows later this week.
I do, however. He's going over to Tim's house, isn't that right?
For breakfast, right?
Breakfast tomorrow morning.
That's our news for tonight. Good night.
See you at 11. Beatlemania is about to get a boost here in about 3 hours, and that's when former Beatle Paul McCartney takes the stage at Riverfront Coliseum for his sold-out concert.
Sold out to new and old fans alike. Today, Paul Schaefer caught up with a woman who was 13 and screaming wildly when Paul McCartney appeared here with the Beatles in the 60s. Tonight, she's going back for more, and here's a Beatles flashback.
Remember back then? It's 1964. The Beatles are playing the Gardens. The English invasion has landed in Cincinnati. Let's take a minute here to listen, to watch, and remember. Linda Lebo was 13 years old, and like a lot of girls in 1966, in love with the Beatles, but especially Paul McCartney.
The Beatles were, I think, on home plate, somewhere around here.
Standing where the Beatles played at what used to be Old Crosley Field in 1966, we chatted about tonight's concert and about those concerts years ago. Linda wore a special blue polka-dotted dress to the Saturday performance, but before the boys came on, the rains came down.
Well, the big dilemma was that the concert was canceled Saturday night because of rain, and we had to come back the next day at noon. What to wear? My mother would have none of that, and I wore the same navy blue pin dot dress because Paul hadn't seen me yet in it, so I figured it was okay to wear it again.
I need somebody help, not just anybody help. You know, I need...
Does he still bring your hormones to a boil?
Yeah, well, I would say I still find him attractive.
Linda was somewhere in that crowd at Crosley that day, dreaming her 13-year-old dreams of true love. Her ultimate teen fantasy?
Paul McCartney pulling up in front of Seton High School and picking me up after school. I guess that was the epitome of really falling for somebody.
But times have changed, and even though Paul fell for a different Linda, he did fall for Cincinnati.
Cincinnati, Cincinnati, you're a heck of a town.
Paul McCartney.